Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a My 2 Cent video for this week, for the week of May 10th to the 16th, 2026, where I take a look at a couple of stories that caught my attention and give you my thoughts and my opinion about them. And there are 4 stories to cover this week, including a comment made by the Bioshock creator in terms about graphics and how far we've gotten, or how maybe we've hit a wall or something like that, while talking about, the Switch 2 and the SteamMachine. Sega basically reevaluated some of their approach about their so-called game as a service, or super game as one has been referred to, though. An interesting rumor popping up regarding Capcom, with one so-called leaker kind of dissing themselves from another leaker and all, and eBay basically responding to GameStop's offer to buy them, and it not completely surprised about eBay's response or anything. If you're interested in where I got the source of these information, links will be in the description of this video, assuming you watch this either on YouTube or Patreon, as well as the timestamps will also be there if there are certain parts of this video you wish to skip to and all. But before we get started, I like to do what I like to call the quick My 2 Cent stories that kind of caught my attention, but I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details. The first one has to do with basically Nintendo Switch Online. It has expanded with basically 5 more games that they put on the server. This one is all Virtual Boy games, though. I think some of them are ranging from, like, I think one of them is like Jack Brothers and all. I mean, I've heard of some of these games, to be exact. Honestly, I never owned a Virtual Boy or anything like that. And while it's nice to see that they're adding more to the Virtual Boy library for the for the Nintendo Switch Online, at the same time, I kind of wish that there were more NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis games that could have been added as well. Maybe we'll see one at some point down the road, but certainly nice for those who are enjoying maybe the Virtual Boy part of the Nintendo Switch Online service or anything like that, if you have that and all. We also learned that the creator or the legend creator of the Tekken series has a new studio at SNK and everything, after working years at Bandai Namco and all. And it'll be very interesting to see what this person does in terms of basically what this new studio will be in for, anything like that. It could be maybe a fighting game in general, since he's known for creating the Tekken and I think the Soul Calibur series as well. So it could be maybe another take on King of Fighters, or maybe a revival of any of the other fighting games they've done, like whether it's Samurai Showdown, Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, or maybe different franchises in the SNK library, or something completely new. So who knows how that is going to play out and all, but obviously he's creating a new studio alongside with that will work under SNK and all. We also learned that apparently Mouse PI for Hire, apparently the publisher is happy with how the game has done, and it's apparently sold very well, that they've reported that they made all their money back in terms of investment, which is certainly good indeed. I am planning to get the game, though. I pre-ordered the physical copy for the Switch 2. Supposedly, I think that'll be out in July, maybe June, I'm not 100% sure about, but having seen video and footage of this game, it's definitely one on my radar indeed. I like the unique art style with the first-person shooter type approach that they are aiming for with that game. So that's definitely one I'll be keeping an eye out, though. But good, assuming what the publisher is saying is true. Not good for them, especially for their first game that they published. They apparently got off to a very good start, indeed and all. We also learned that Square Enix wants to continue to promote their multi-platform approach strategy, especially onto the Nintendo Switch 2, which I think that's very good indeed. Obviously, Square Enix is sort of leaning away with being where a majority of their games are just on the PlayStation system only. They're pushing more and more to have their games available on multiple systems. We've seen that especially on the Switch 2 when Final Fantasy VII Remake and Intergrade came out for the Switch 2 earlier this year. We know Rebirth is on its way, and of course we know that the Final Fantasy I think that Final Fantasy online multiplayer game 14 is going to be out be out soon for the Switch 2 and everything. So it's clear Square Enix is definitely pushing more for a multi-platform strategy. And personally, I don't think that is a bad thing at all. And last but not least, the studio Kodawa, I apologize for not saying that correctly, or one of the studios that owns, From Software and all, has basically reconfirmed that the Dustbloods and Elder Rings are still set to be released in 2026 on the Switch 2. Dustblood, we haven't heard a huge amount about. We've heard some interviews here and there, but we've only seen one, at least footage of that, since that was on the trailer for basically during that April Nintendo Switch 2 Direct that happened and everything. So hopefully we'll hear more about Dustbloods though. Elden Ring, on the other hand, is sort of interesting as that game was announced for the Switch 2, but earlier footage had that game basically running not so great, but latest footage seemed to indicate that it's running better given the extra time that they needed to port that game over. And it's also learning that I believe it will be a game key card as well. So, but in either case though, if they're saying it's still released in 2026, which I'm hoping we'll get a release date for those games soon. Perhaps if the so-called June Direct does happen, if it does happen, to be exact though, we'll get an actual concrete release date for those games and all. And in the movie and TV show part of the Quick Mike You Sent, we had 2 trailers that were shown this week. The first one is basically a new Ghost in the Shell anime that's going to be released on July 7th though. I saw recently the new trailer and I like what I'm seeing about it. Obviously they're aiming more closer to the manga style that the series has been released on. A little bit different than some of the animes that I've seen with Ghost in the Shell in the past though, but either way, this is one I'll keep an eye out though. I do enjoy the series indeed. It was one of the first animes I ever watched, so this one is definitely on my radar indeed. We also saw a new trailer for basically season 3 of My Adventures with Superman, which is finally nice that we finally got a new trailer. We did see a bit of Superboy in there as well though, so I'm very curious to see what direction they go with the 3rd season of My Adventure with Superman. We also learned that apparently the Super Mario Galaxy movie is getting very close to hitting the $1 billion mark indeed. So far the movie has hit, from what I understand, it hit a little over 900 million, so pretty clear that this movie, I think sounding more and more likely it will hit the $1 billion box office, and there's no doubt, despite what critics have said about the movie, apparently it's still doing very well indeed and all. So very nice to see this movie doing very well. It'll be very interesting when we finally hear that it hit the $1 billion mark for good. And last but not least, we're learning that Nintendo seemed to be hiring for a brand new role in terms of movie project promotional manager. It seems as though, given the box office success they've had so far with Super Mario Brothers movie and the Super Mario Galaxy movie, it's clear they're really pushing more and more, putting their IPs in the movie and everything. It will be very interesting to see how, if they could continue that streak with the upcoming live-action Legend of Zelda movie, which last time we heard they finished filming and they've pushed the date up to an earlier date. I think it was from May now into April. And also, it'll be very interesting to see how well the live-action Zelda movie does and whether or not this gives Nintendo basically maybe more of a push to do maybe more live-action stuff, or if it underperforms or bombs, maybe it might have them hit the pause button on that one, to be exact. So we'll wait and see, but it'll be very interesting to see who takes up that role and all. Okay, with the Quick My 2 Cent part now done, along with the movie and TV show part of the Quick My 2 Cent, we'll get started with our first story, and this one has to do with a follow-up to GameStop's attempt to buy eBay and all. Now, last week, though, there was a report coming out that the CEO of GameStop was looking to buy eBay in general. And for a lot of us, we were kind of sort of scratching our heads trying to figure out what was the purpose or the reason for this purchase, to be exact, though, and wondering would this even go through in the first place and all? Well, apparently it seems that eBay has responded to basically GameStop's offer, and apparently it is a flat-out rejection. And they recently wrote a letter or responded to the CEO's response. Now, this comes from IGN, but supposedly this is what the letter had to say. Quote, or the response: "Dear Mr. Cohen, the board, with the support of its independent advisors, has thoroughly reviewed your proposal and has determined to reject it. We have concluded that your proposal is neither credible nor attractive. We have taken into account such factors as 1. eBay's standalone prosperity, 2. the uncertainty regarding your financial prosperity, 3. the impact of your proposal on eBay's long-term growth and profitability, 4. the leverage, operational risk, and leadership structure of a combined entity, 5. the resulting impact of these implies of these factors on valuation, and 6. GameStop's governing and exclusive incentives." Apologize if I'm not saying that correctly. eBay is a strong, resilient business that has delivered meaningful results over the past several years. We have shaped our strategic focus, strengthened execution, enhanced our markets and seller experience, and constantly returned capital to shareholders. With its differentiated global marketplace and clear strategy, eBay board is confident of the company under its current management team and well positioned to continue to drive sustainable growth, execute with discipline, and deliver long-term value for our shareholders. Our team remains focused on executing our strategy and driving our business forward in the best interest of the company, our shareholder, our employee, and million buyers and sellers around the world. Sincerely, the chairman of the board of directors at eBay. So obviously that's eBay's way of saying pretty much no and everything. And from what I understand, they've also suspended, supposedly there's a report coming out that they have suspended the GameStop CEO's account on eBay and all. So that was probably very quick for them to respond, indeed though. And it'll be interesting to see what GameStop does next though. Do they try to go to the shareholders instead and convince the board for GameStop to buy eBay in any way? Do they continue to buy more shares into eBay in general? Maybe try to create some sort of hostile takeover or something like that. So it will be very interesting to see what GameStop decides to do though. I mean, they may back down completely or they may not back down at all. So it'll be very interesting to see that indeed, but obviously right now the eBay's response is a flat out no and all. So overall, eBay has certainly responded to GameStop offer. They said no to it. What GameStop does next, however, remains to be seen at this time though. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to maybe buy more of their stock or try to make an attempt at a hostile takeover or go straight to the shareholders and all. It wouldn't surprise me if that does happen, but at the same time, it may not happen at all anyway. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to part 2. And this one has to do with supposedly a leaker or insider has spilled the beans on some information regarding what's going on at Capcom, with another leaker basically distancing themselves indeed from this leaker and all. So we'll take a quick break and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part two of my 2 cent video, and for this one, we're going to be taking a look at some supposedly a leaker making some claims about some future Capcom games out there that could be in the works or something like that, with another leaker distancing themselves and all. Now, there's no doubt Capcom has been on a roll lately, to be exact, and this year is no different though. We had 3 major games that came out for them: Resident Evil Requiem, Pragmata, a brand new IP from Capcom, and Monster Hunter Stories 3. And all 3 of them seem to be, at least I think, doing very well. I'm not sure about Monster Hunter Story 3. Maybe it's doing better than what others might make it sound like it is, but Pragmata and Resident Evil Requiem have certainly done very well from Capcom, indeed and all. And obviously we have the upcoming new Onimusha game that is going to be coming out as well. And maybe some more surprises we just don't know about though. But recently a leaker has sort of put out some information that seemed to indicate maybe some idea of what we could see from Capcom, at least according to what this leaker is saying though. From an article from My Nintendo, it reads, quote, a Capcom insider who appears to be trusted by Resident Evil insider Dusk Goldman has spilled the beans on what's been happening at the Japanese developer. The biggest news is that a remake of the original Devil May Cry is in development, which will sure to please fans of the long-running series. The insider has spilled the beans on various Resident Evil games Capcom's planning to remake, and the information seemed to back up Dusk Goldman's prior release. This is what this leaker had to say. Devil May Cry 1 remake is in development. In July 2022, there was a meeting to discuss the next step for Resident Evil games. In that meeting, the green light was given to the remake of Zero, Code Veronica, Resident Evil 1, and Resident Evil 10. Code names for the project are Project Chamber, Zero, Project Fallen, Resident Evil 1, and Project Red Life, Resident Evil 10. Resident Evil 1 Remake was in pre-production since 2022 and 2023 and just recently entered full production. Claire Redfield will be the protagonist for Project Red Life, Resident Evil 10. Zero and Resident Evil 10 will use the REX engine. It could be referring to could be a new engine or could be the traditional Resident Evil engine and all. In 2022, Capcom shut down a lot of the fan remakes of said game, Zero, Code Veronica, Resident Evil 1, coincidentally in the same year of the meeting. Ada Wong is in their RE9 DLC, corroborated by Dusk. Hint that there'll be more than one story DLC. Now, following this so-called leak, though, Dusk Goldman has chimed in on this, and he sort of posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, basically saying, quote, the Devil May Cry 2, Devil May Cry, I think 21, or I think 1 remake, and Resident Evil 10 pro-tag rumor did not come from me. Typical deals of people stuffing rumors together and then claiming I said that to happen to me all the time. I've said absolutely nothing on either topic to date. So he's basically has distanced himself from this though. So it's possible some of this stuff could be false though. That being said though, I could see some of this stuff basically happening. For example, Resident Evil 10, given how well Requiem has been well received, and given how well we've seen with a lot of the Resident Evil games lately from Capcom, I would say Resident Evil 10, I think, is more than likely happen. I don't know how long we'll wait for that game. Obviously, we'll have to wait until Capcom says something, but I can see Resident Evil 10 happening. As far as Claire Redfield being in Resident Evil 10, again, that's a possibility, though. We haven't seen her not been used as much. The last time I remember seeing her was in Resident Evil Revelation 2. I think that was, and that's the last time she was like the main character in a game and everything. So who knows? Maybe that could happen. But I think Resident Evil 10, I think, given how well Requiem was received, I could see that happening though. I can also see a remake of Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica, and even Resident Evil 1. That one has been rumored back and forth for quite some time though, but given how well the remake of Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 went down, and how well that was well received in terms of sales-wise, I wouldn't be surprised if a remake of 0 or Code Veronica does happen, although we're hearing more and more that Code Veronica seems to be much further along than what I think some out there have said. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear something about Code Veronica and everything. The remake of Resident Evil 1, I'm kind of mixed on that one, considering we did get a remake back in 2002 for the GameCube, but who knows? Maybe we'll get another remake of that one. If we've gotten different remakes of Star Fox 64 before though, I wouldn't be surprised if we get another remake of Resident Evil 1 indeed. As far as a remake of Devil May Cry 1, again, Who knows if that is true or not. If should it happen though, maybe in terms of the gameplay mechanics, it follows an approach similar to maybe what Devil May Cry 4 or 5 did. I mean, that's a possibility. To be exact though. So obviously that is, again, possibility, but I'm not really sure if a remake of Devil May Cry 1 will happen or not. But either case though, I think some of this so-called leak or so-called rumor, I think is a possibility. I'm believing most likely Resident Evil 10 is more than likely to happen and everything like that. But like anything, it should be taken with a grain of salt though, especially since an inside Capcom leaker has sort of distanced themselves from this leaker. It does give the impression that there is a possibility not all of it is accurate or not completely 100% spot on and all. So overall, very interesting what this leaker is saying though, even though Dust Goldman has distanced himself from this leaker though, I could see some of this happening. It is a possibility to be exact, but like anything, it should be taken with a grain of salt nevertheless and all. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to part 3, and this one has to do with Sega recently changing course a little bit following supposedly not so great with some of their the live service, and perhaps I think it's not more than likely canceled their so-called super game and all. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 3 of my 2 cent video, and for this one, we're going to be taking a look at Sega, and apparently they seem to be changing course, at least with one of their so-called games or some of their strategy though. We've seen Sega has seen its like highs and lows before though. There have been some lows with, like Alien Colonial Marines and everything, but we have seen some highs with the Yakuza series that's been doing very well for them. To even when they bought Aulx though, the Persona series seems to be doing fine. We know that a remake of Persona 4 is happening, and I do believe we know that Persona 6 is in the works and all. But one thing that seemed to happen a couple years ago was Sega's push for this so-called super game and all that they were trying to make and everything. And everyone was kind of wondering what was going to be this super game about and everything. And some were pointing it to be like a live service or a gacha game, to be exact. Well, recently this week, Sega reported one of their net losses, though, and it seems that they have certainly re-examined their strategy, at least with the game and service size, and it does seem to indicate they have canceled this so-called super game and all. In 2 articles, though, first one is from GameDevelopers.com. It reads that, quote, after an update of a correction regarding Ravio's future business, the same studio that's done Angry Birds and all, it says, quote, Sega has reviewed its strategic plans around the games as a service and is set to lower the priorities of free-to-play games moving forward. The news comes from a financial result for the year ending March 31st, 2026. In a slide name review of games as a service strategy, the company outlines that new free-to-play titles struggled in fiscal year 2026. Specifically, Sonic Rumble Party had a weak performance, and there was a delay in the launch of some titles, although Sega didn't disclose which. The company also lamented its failure to make more from its collaboration with Rovio, the mobile developer giant that it acquired back in 2023. In the same sideline, Sega announced it's canceled its Super Game. This referred to an initiative back in 2021 when it was set to see Sega partner with Microsoft to create games using the Azure cloud platform. The Super Game has come in and out of the public eye in recent years. In late 2022, Sega reaffirmed its commitment to the project, hoping to have it in the hands of players by March 2026. The company was projecting it would deliver lifetime sales of at least 100 billion yens, around 672 million at the time. Then in 2023, Sega reportedly cooled its interest in the blockchain game market after previously suggesting it might leverage the technology to create a super game. Moving forward, Sega plans to review its position of its pillars for medium to long-term growth. In other words, it has lowered the priorities of the free-to-play games. Some of the division development personals, over 100 people, have been transferred to its full game development division to focus on mainstream IPs. As for Rovio, or the studio that made Angry Birds and all, Sega says the mobile company will continue its effort towards a global games as a service, but will focus on its own rebuilding first. Meanwhile, in another report, this one from Nintendo Life, it reads that, quote, although Sega has officially axed its Super Game, according to Sega Sammy's latest financial result presentation, its new titles and revived projects are still in the pipeline. The sideline presentation for fiscal year ending March 2026 confirms Sega still has upcoming plans for multiple classic IP. This includes games from Crazy Taxi, Golden Axe, Jet Set Radio, and Streets of Rage, with official titles and release date to be revealed in the future. Along with this, it confirms the new Virtual Fighter project is arriving at some point in the future and is being joined by Persona 4 Revival, Aliens Isolation, two Total Wars announcement, and Stranger Than Heaven, which is due out this winter. A bunch of movies and animation plans are also listed, apart from Sonic the Hedgehog 4, due out March 2027. It's currently got Golden Axe, Shinobi, Streets of Rage, Eternal Champions, The House of the Dead, and Outrunner planned, though. So, in other words, it does seem like the Super Game is not going to happen and everything like that, but other projects like that short clip of Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio is still happening and all, which, to me, that is a good thing. Indeed, it's nice to know that those games are still alive and kicking, though. Perhaps Sega saw like maybe doubling down on gaming service is probably not the best strategy out there. It's very difficult to find games as a service or live service games are not as easy as it may sound. If we've seen a lot of developers try, and a lot of them have failed miserably on that front, to be exact. Not that live service games shouldn't exist, it's just very tough to really break into that, to be exact, though. And so it seems as though Sega looks like they're going to take a different direction, indeed, and I'm very pleased with that. I certainly think that is a good thing indeed. Excuse me. Hopefully this opens the door to maybe other projects gaining a revival, to be exact, or maybe some new IPs from them. Look at what we're seeing with Capcom as a good example of that. They were in a bad position, and yet they seem to have been doing very good lately, putting out quality titles, to be exact, though. So maybe Sega could take a page out of what Capcom is doing and everything. So it's going to be interesting to see what this means for the future of Sega going forward and all. So overall, great to see. It's great to see that this Super Game or this games as a service type of thing got canceled, though. But also really great to see that we know that the revival of Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, and even a new Golden Axe and Streets of Rage game is still in the works and everything. So that is certainly good indeed, and hopefully this will lead to maybe some new games or even some more revivals from Sega and all. Maybe a revival of Skies of Arcadia, maybe another Valkyrie Chronicles games, to be exact, though. So time will ultimately tell if that is the case or not at all. Okay, and we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll get to our fourth and final part of this My Two Set video, and this one has to do with the creator of Bioshock making an interesting comment surrounding graphics and everything like that, and also tying in with the SteamMachine and the Nintendo Switch 2. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with our fourth and final part of our My Two Cent video, and this one has to do with a comment made by the Bioshock creator Ken Levin, if I'm saying his name correctly and all, that really kind of caught my attention to a certain degree. Now, most of you are aware he worked at, I think it was Aulx Games or something like that, but either way, they were the studio that did the original Bioshock, and I believe Bioshock Infinite. They really had no I don't think they played any part with Bioshock 2 and all, but in either case, though, Bioshock is certainly one of my favorite FPS shooters out there, along with games like Doom and Wolfenstein and everything like that, though. But an interesting comment he made had to do with visuals and all that recently popped up and everything like that. And he was looking at basically stuff like not only the SteamMachine, but the Nintendo Switch 2. And a comment that he made is very interesting, and I think there is definitely truth to what he is basically saying and all. In an article which was picked up by My Nintendo, it reads that, quote, the creator behind the acclaimed Bioshock series, Kevin Levin, if I'm saying this name correctly though, has spoken about the number of subjects with IGN. One thing that was touched on was the flashy visuals have now reached a point of diminishing returns. He said he points to the Nintendo Switch 2, the Steam Deck, and even the upcoming Switch machine as proof that current video game hardware is more than adequate enough on the visual front. However, both the Microsoft and Sony are relying on next generation consoles to be arriving next year, but could be pushed back due to component shortage though. He told IGN, quote, realism doesn't age as well as more stylistic games. Bioshock still looks good, I think, because it wasn't trying to get every nuts and bolts super realistic, combined with players wanting for more accessible hardware such as the Nintendo Switch 2 and even the Steam Deck. He posts that hardware is good enough for anything developers want to do. Look at, say, the Switch 2 and even the new Steam machine coming out, he continues. They are not massive technological upgrades. That wasn't their strategy. I think people are realizing we're hitting a bit of diminished returns with that, though. I will say that I do have to agree with a lot of stuff that he basically has said, though. I mean, we're not in the kind of situation we went from when we went to the NES to the Super NES, or the Super NES to the N64, or like, the N64 to the GameCube, and so forth, or like how we saw when we went from the PlayStation to the PS2, PS2 to PS3, PS3 to PS4, and all. I do kind of agree with what he is basically saying, and if I'm reading this correctly, is the fact that I think that we've reached a point where I don't know if we could push visuals any further than where we are right now. Now, it is possible at some point down the road we can really do some major graphical leaps, but I think we are reaching a point where I'm not sure we're there yet, or if we'll ever reach that point. And I do kind of agree with him when he mentions both the Steam Deck, the Steam Machine, and the Switch 2, especially when you have stuff like the Switch 2's DLSS that is used to help with, like AI upscaling and everything. So I think it is a very valid point indeed, in talking about how, realistic graphics I believe don't age as well as what we've seen as more stylistic graphics. I do think that's kind of true. I mean, I look at games like, say, like Okami, for example. I mean, it's not the most realistic game out there, but art style, it looks really good, and it shows how video games can be sort of a art form, indeed, to even games like, Jet Set Radio or Jet Grind Radio are another good example of that. Even games like Mario Galaxy, in a way, is kind of an art form to a certain extent and all. So I think it is a very valid point to even how some games may, while visually aren't exactly perfect, gameplay-wise, the story are actually good. I mean, the Batman Arkham trilogy is another good example of that. So I think it is a very valid point indeed, and it does raise questions of what that puts the position of both Microsoft and Sony, especially with Project Helix and the PS6, which that could be a tough sell for them, besides the whole component issue and RAM shortage that could be an issue, and the cost for these systems indeed and all. So I think it's a very good point indeed. That's not to say we can't see a leap in graphics at some point down the road. There's always that possibility and all, but I do have to say I do think we have reached a point where I think we've pushed the visuals as far as we could at this point. So overall, I will say I think it is a very good point the Bioshock creator has brought up, though, and it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to work. We're very interested to see what Microsoft and Sony does, especially when eventually the PS6 and Project Helix comes out and all. Okay, this concludes this My 2 Cent video for this week. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about eBay rejecting GameStop's offer to buying them? Do you think eBay made the right call on this one? Or do you think that eBay should have allowed GameStop to buy them? Do you think GameStop will make an attempt to go maybe to the shareholders, or even make an attempt to try to do maybe a hostile takeover or buy more of eBay's share by any chance? What are your thoughts about this so-called leak from that this leaker or insider claim that he got from about upcoming Capcom projects? So, do you think this leaker is legitimate, or do you think it's not legitimate, especially since another Capcom insider by the name of Dust Goldman has distanced himself from this leaker and everything? What are your thoughts about Sega canceling this Super game and all? Do you think this was the right move for Sega, or do you think it may have been the wrong move and all? And are you glad that they're still reviving multiple legacy franchises like Jet Set Radio, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe and all? And what are your thoughts about some of the comments the Bioshock creator made in terms about visuals and graphics and all? Do you think he is spot on about it, saying that we probably have reached a point of how far we could push visuals in general? Or do you think that there's still a possibility we could take the next graphical leap with, the next gen systems whenever those systems come out and all? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below. Let me know what you think. And if you do like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it. And I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You can do it through PayPal Me, Patreon, or Steamlands. Links will be in the description of this video, assuming you're watching this either on YouTube or Patreon. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye.